It is now my extreme pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, one of our favorite friends and definitely one of my favorite authors, the Reverend Dr. Jerry Troyer. Dr. Jerry is a native of San Diego, California, where he serves as a staff minister at the Center for Spiritual Living and is also an administrator for the Anton affiliated New Thought Network, an organization of independent New Thought religious science centers, of which CLF is a member church. Dr. Jerry lives in La Mesa, California, with his beloved golden retriever, Maggie. And now, without further ado, here is Dr. Jerry Troyer.
Greetings, Creative Living Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Jerry Troyer, and it's a great pleasure to be with you thanks to the joys of technology. Thanks to Reverend Dr. Sherry for the opportunity. As you may know, your theme for the month is Bloom Where You're Planted. And my topic for this morning is adding to that while dealing with the weeds. As so very often happens, as I am speaking to you and with you, I am also speaking to myself. So I thank you for being with me as I'm talking to myself. It's great to be with you this morning. Do you ever think about why you're here in this moment? You could have been on the earth around the times of Jesus and been one of the disciples or one of the women at the tomb. You could have been born in prehistoric times and been very concerned about the saber-toothed tiger that's coming up behind you. You could have been born in the late 1800s and early 1900s and dealing with the Depression. And who's to say you weren't? A lot of people believe in reincarnation and past lives, and so we were here doing something before, and here we are, and when we're done here, we'll go on to our next experience in a new life. Whatever your belief about that is fine, but the point is, here we are in this thing called life in 2020. Remember the John Lennon song, "Nobody told me there'd be days like these. Strange days indeed." I believe you'll agree with me that we're doing things we've never done before, doing things we never thought we'd do before, not doing things that we've always done before, and the list goes on and on. But here we are, planted in 2020. When we do our spiritual mind treatment, our affirmative prayer, we know that at the end we say, "And so it is," or amen, but "and so it is," and we know that something happens. We know that we accept that it is. Very often we pray for physical healing for ourselves or someone else. And I say perfect healing, whatever that perfect means. So it is physical healing and moving on in this life, or it is perfect healing transitioning to the next experience. But it is perfect, it is in divine order, it is perfectly right for whoever it is we're praying for or treating for. Spiritual practices to me, and I'm sure to you as well, and whatever you call that, are a very important part of our blooming experience. Living life consciously, being aware of our thoughts, recognizing our oneness, and recognizing that life is for us, life with a capital L. Life is for us, loves us, and wants us to be happy. However, it's been my experience, and I bet it's been yours, that life doesn't always turn out the way we would have expected. If people would just cooperate and I bet it's been your experience as it's been mine, if people would just cooperate, if they just do what we want them to do, if they take care of themselves, if they just behave, if they just do what King Jerry wants them to do, their life, and certainly mine, would be so much better. But alas, that is very often not the case. I'm sure you've heard the expression, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So now that we are in this teaching, now that we might be ministers or practitioners, and I would suggest that if you've been in this teaching for more than just a few months, even if you don't have a certificate on your wall yet, you're still a practitioner. But once we're in this teaching and we know the truth and we know what's going on, things change, but life continues to be life. It's all about how we deal with it, how we handle it, how we look at it, that makes all the difference. And I'll talk much more about that later on. Because as we're chopping wood and carrying water and blooming, there are some weeds that creep in. You might remember my story from when the last time we were together, either by Zoom or in person. My husband made his transition in the airport, the George Bush Airport, International Airport in Houston, on our way home from an Anton conference in Kansas City. And it was October 17th, 2018, so 2 years ago yesterday. He had been diagnosed and treated for colon cancer, and the chemo was doing wonderful things to the tumors, but terrible things to his body. And so I think it probably was maybe a blood clot from the flight, but he died. He actually died in the airport. I did a great job through the treatment of denying and being in principle, and I absolutely was, and knowing perfect health for him and what I wanted perfect health to be for him. But as we also know, people on their path aren't necessarily doing what we want them to do, as we talked about before. Part of my ministry that I've found since his death has to do with allowing ourselves to deal with the weeds. The weeds being not only those experiences, but our emotions and our feelings as a result of them. In religious science and New Thought and Science of Mind, we tend to be very positive. We absolutely know that all is well, that they're on their path, that everything is in divine order and all of those things. And it's so important for us to remember that. That's the truth. But the fact is that in this experience, I am grieving, I am hurting, I am angry, I am resentful, I am whatever those feelings are that I'm feeling. And how important it is for us to acknowledge the weeds, the feelings, so that we can process them and dig them out and release them. Sometimes coexist with the weeds. That's important as well. Last time we were together, we talked about toxic positivity, those statements that we make that's absolutely true, but that sometimes don't allow us to feel what we feel. It was a challenge. I got to say, it was a challenge for me, and it might, if you've been through this experience of loss, and whether it was someone's death or a job ending or a relationship changing or just something in your life that you would not have consciously chosen and would not have preferred, there's the opportunity to squash those feelings. And it's important that we recognize that there's a weed there and process it through rather than just staying in denial about it. Part of the experience for me was asking the question, who am I now? Because my husband was Jerry and I was Jerry squared. And we were Jerry and Jerry squared for 33 years. So who am I now if I'm not Jerry squared? You are someone, you might be someone's mother or father or husband or wife. You might be, and you get to fill in the blank of what you do in your work. What happens and what do we say to ourselves and how do we process through those experiences when we aren't that anymore? I'm not someone's husband. I'm not someone's wife. I'm not that, whatever that was, I'm not that anymore. How do we maintain that identity and find the new purpose in our lives? Really important questions and really important things to consider. What I found was, and I went through that experience with a job change, I might not be doing that job anymore, but because I know that spirit is the source of my good, there's something else, there's some other way that spirit has of bringing my financial good to me. I might not be that person's husband or wife anymore, but spirit has the most amazing way of bringing love into my life and quite possibly bringing me a new relationship. And don't tell anybody, but spirit has, which is really incredibly exciting. But that's a separate story. As we begin to heal, as we begin to look at the weeds, to not deny them, but allow them, then we can heal through this. We can turn the page into the new chapter of our lives, and then we can lovingly release or dig out the weeds. So in 2020, if you look at things that aren't necessarily what you had in mind as weeds, you could look back on 2020 and see that we had a pretty good bumper crop of dandelions, of crabgrass, of Bermuda grass, of ragweed, of goosegrass, of all those things in our garden in the midst of our flowers that are blooming. So how do we bloom where we've been planted? How do we stay anchored in principle? How do we keep putting one foot in front of the other? Because I don't know about you, but there are those days when I just really want to go do whatever. I want to climb on a plane and go someplace. I want to go to church on Sunday. I want to do whatever it is that we're just not yet able to do. And if we're feeling a little bit choked off by the weeds, how do we get back to blooming again? I was looking for the author for this wonderful statement that I'm sure you've heard before, Zig Ziglar and a few other people, quoting, "It's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it." In Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's writing about grief, she says the final stage of the 5 steps or the 5 stages, the last stage is acceptance. After Well, maybe after you go through the grieving, but as you're going through it, at some point, it kind of gets through all the process and finally drops into your heart that this is how it is now. Because living in denial, denial not just being a river in Egypt, but denial also being, no, but that can't be. No, but that's not right. As we get past that, we get to acceptance, oftentimes with sadness. My words, not Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, but I believe there is sadness there, and sadness that whatever it was isn't happening anymore, but also that acceptance that this is how it is. It's October of 2020, and we've not been able to do a lot of things that we wanted to do, or at least I haven't, and I bet you haven't as well this year. You might have missed a wedding. You might have missed a high school or college graduation. I have, and you might as well have, airline tickets burning a hole in your pocket, or cruise tickets, or the most amazing vacation of your life tickets burning a hole in your pocket that you weren't able to use, and we're not quite sure when we're able to use that, when we will be able to do what we want to do. That brings grief. I believe that anytime life doesn't go the way we had in mind, there's a great big fat weed there, and it brings us grief and a feeling of loss and a feeling of letdown. So the opportunity is to look at that and see how we can deal with it, live with it, and maybe coexist with it. Because we won't get these months in 2020 back, but there are opportunities coming. There are absolutely opportunities coming for us to do what we weren't able to do so far this year. Acceptance that this is how it is now. Will we get back to stadiums with 65 or 70,000 people packed in? Will we get back to conferences with thousands and thousands of people? Don't know. This is how it is now, without projecting or worrying about how it's going to be later on. One of the weeds can sometimes be not allowing ourselves to stay in the moment. The yes, but what happens if? Don't know. All we can do is stay in this moment and be safe and be secure and know that in this moment, all is well. It's different out there. Jerry and I were together for 33 years, and he passed away 2 years ago. He died 2 years ago. In my acceptance process, I'm allowing myself to use the D word that we try and stay away from, but the truth is that he died. So it's been 33 plus 2, so it's been 35 years since I dated. The world was very different 35 years ago. I don't think there was internet even. The dinosaurs were, no, it wasn't that long ago. But there weren't apps on your phone where you could meet people. There wasn't eHarmony. There wasn't all these things that we have now. And so it's a different experience. Can we allow ourselves to accept that and say, this is how it is now? You might have seen my posting on Facebook yesterday related to acceptance, and that this just really touched my heart. So the level of non-acceptance is it's raining. I don't like the rain. I wish it wasn't raining. My day would be better if it wasn't raining. My day is ruined. Every day is like this. Why does it always rain when I want it to be sunny? It just always rains. versus it's raining. Yep. That's it. Instead of staying stuck in how I wish it was, there is the opportunity to say, this is how it is. One of my favorite quotes from A Course in Miracles is, I could have peace. No, I'm sorry. I could see peace instead of this. When we have those experiences, when we have those weeds, it's not that there's a weed there because there's going to be a weed there. It's about how we deal with it, how we handle it. Do we allow ourselves to accept it? One of my favorite books is Smile for No Good Reason by Lee Jampolsky. And in the book, he talks about toddler wisdom. 3 key points for us as we're living life, dealing with the weeds, blooming, and chopping wood and carrying water, because we're doing all of these things simultaneously. The first being, bye-bye. You know, if you've ever dealt with a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old and someone's leaving, bye-bye. Probably no tears, probably no, oh dear God, when will I see you again? Probably no, what am I going to do without you? Just a simple, okay, you're leaving, things are changing, bye-bye. What if we could look at those weeds, those changes, those losses with a little more lightness and a little less drama and a little less fear, recognizing that the universe abhors a vacuum. So when something changes, when someone or something leaves, there will be a new opportunity for us. And trust this process of this thing called life. So, toddler wisdom, first one is bye-bye. Second one is all gone, done with lunch. All gone. Not, oh God, what's for dinner? Not, what are we going to do now? Just a very simple, all gone, I finished my lunch, I'm going to go out and play. So much easier, recognizing that you can't pick the last orange off the tree. When our being is anchored in principle and recognizing that spirit is our source, when we pick the last orange off the tree, we know that in the unseen, there is more good being created for us, that life always says yes to us and takes care of us. So we can have that absolute knowing with spirit as our source that there is more good coming for us. All gone. So bye-bye, all gone. And my favorite is whoopsie. Spilled that milk. Whoopsie. Forgot to do whatever that was. Whoopsie. Lost my temper. Whoopsie. This allows us to recognize we're always doing the best we can, and so is everybody else. And so rather than judging, rather than creating resentment toward others and regret for ourselves, we can just stay in that recognition that Whoopsie. You just clean it up and get a fresh glass of milk. You just forgive yourself and others as you need to and move forward. Bye-bye. All gone. Whoopsie. I feel like we've missed a lot in 2020. When Reverend Dr. Sherry and I first talked about my guest speaking on this day, it was my intention to be with you in person. And of course, we're not doing that yet. But we know there will be other opportunities. There will be other opportunities for us to do all the wonderful things that we've not been able to do right now. We just allow ourselves to remember that we're not done yet. The recovery community uses the Serenity Prayer, and you might be familiar with it. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So very often the weed, to use that idea again, the weed is when we can't accept whatever it is that needs to be accepted. That dandelion, what's that dandelion doing in my garden? What's it bringing me? What's it telling me? What do I need to forgive? What do I need to release so that I can dig that up? They stay, those weeds in our garden that keep us from blooming as we could, stay unless and until we're ready to release them. So what are we ready to release? What weeds are we ready to let go of? Blooming where we've been planted includes releasing the weeds that we can, coming to terms with and coexisting with the weeds that we can't. The loss of someone's physical presence in our lives is a weed maybe that we can't release, but we can accept it and coexist with it. And we can find peace instead of this. So with that in mind, would you join me in the light for just a moment? Releasing thoughts of earlier today, releasing thoughts of later today or tomorrow, we allow ourselves to be fully present in this moment. And as we do, we are reminded of our oneness with the God presence with one another and with all of life. And we give great thanks for this day, for the opportunity to be together thanks to the joys and wonders of technology. To be together as one mind and one heart in this beloved spiritual community. And today, like never before and moving forward, we allow ourselves to recognize the weeds, to recognize those feelings and those experiences that aren't as we would have chosen. And without judgment, without shooting on ourselves, we accept. We accept that we never walk alone. We accept that we are always loved, always nurtured, always divinely guided. We accept that. And moving forward in peace and calm and wisdom, we know that all is well. For this time together, for this teaching, for Creative Living Fellowship, we give great thanks. And together we say, and so it is.